Okay, so we are going to do something different today. We are going to rank all title fights that have happened in the UFC this year, whether for an undisputed title or a BMF title. This tier list will be based on hype, performance, and overall excitement surrounding the fight. The first fight I will rank is the UFC 313 main event, which featured Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. There was a lot of anticipation for this fight because Ankalaev was the rightful contender that we had been waiting to get his title shot, as he had not lost in over 7 years, and because he was the first real contender that had the takedown threat that was not yet presented to a high-level kickboxer like Alex Pereira. We all saw my prediction for the fight. I picked Magomed Ankalaev to win the fight, but I was super surprised that he was not able to even land a single takedown because he shot like 11 of them. That was one part of the fight that people were not happy about because they saw their favorite fighter get completely outworked by a Russian dude. Ankalaev presented the takedown threat, and that was enough for Alex Pereira to be super scared to throw his hands, so he resorted to throwing leg kicks and being on his bike for the whole fight. I thought Ankalaev did a great job executing his game plan because he was always on the front foot and was the guy who was pressuring. But the problem from an excitement standpoint was the amount of clinching there was. Ankalaev had a total of 5 minutes and 22 seconds of control time, even without a takedown. And a moment that really killed it was when the fourth round was a complete clinch fest and killed some of the momentum. Overall, I think this fight would be in the B tier. Now, the next fight we will be examining is UFC 315 in Montreal, specifically the main event, which featured a matchup between Belal Muhammad and Della Maddalena. This was one of the most exciting fights of the year in terms of fight excitement, because Belal decided that he had hands like Canelo and fed into the fans' criticism, so he decided to strike for this fight. It was a weird move to do against JDM, who has some of the best boxing in the UFC. Belal did not commit to shooting any takedowns until late into the third round, I believe, and at that point, it was already too late, and they were both super slippery, so it became much harder to land a takedown. Belal has a real chin on him, and he really did hold his own in this fight because the striking was still competitive, even though JDM had the slight edge. There were some close rounds in this fight, and some people had it 3-1 for JDM coming into the fifth, but a lot of people, including me, had it 2-2 coming into the fifth. This fight really did become a bloodbath, with Belal having his lips split open and everything. We got to see JDM also really grind down in the fifth round and land some nasty long combinations to seal the deal and win the title. The performance was amazing, the excitement was there, but the pre-fight hype was not all the way present because people thought Belal was going to take down spam him. Overall, I think this fight was A-tier material. Now we're going to be looking at the most recent title fight, which was Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. This fight was maybe the most hyped up fight of the year because most people considered it a 50-50 fight, as it resembled an immovable object versus an unstoppable force. Most people had the same analysis pre-fight, which was that if Khamzat was not able to submit him or overwhelm him within the first round or two, that he would eventually gas out like he did versus Kamaru Usman or Gilbert Burns and have a slugfest and lose, because DDP has the heart of a champion and a really good gas tank. I picked Chimaev to win by submission, but I had no idea that he would be able to maintain an insane pace for 5 rounds and continue to pummel DDP for so long. I mean, it wasn't just the gas tank that improved, but Khamzat also valued position over submission, and that helped him because he got DDP into crucifix multiple times and pounded him, setting a record for strikes at 529 strikes. Some people were not a fan of the prolonged grappling, but I was really astonished that he was even able to dominate such a strong physical presence like DDP and also a good grappler like him. Overall, the hype was real for this fight. The performance was world-class as he dominated the scorecards. The excitement may not have been the best for casuals, but I loved watching the dominance. I think this title fight was S tier. The next fight we will be looking at is the co-main of UFC 316, which was Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison was like a -700 favorite for this fight, which made it one of the most lopsided betting odds in a championship fight, and by far the most by any challenger. This fight card did not have much hype in general because the main event was an undeserved rematch, and we will get to that in a minute. But still, this fight went totally as expected because Kayla Harrison is low-key a weight bully and just out-muscled Juliana Pena from start to finish of this fight. I mean, it wasn't really surprising, and once Kayla got a hold of the Kimura, I knew it was over. The cool thing about this fight was the aftermath and how Kayla called out Amanda Nunes to return to the UFC, so that was definitely something. The only hype that was really built up from this fight was the press conference because Juliana Pena is someone who is known for always bringing the heat in the press conference. But that is about it. There isn't much else to say about this fight, so I think I'm going to put this title fight in the D tier. One fight that I have to admit I didn't watch live is UFC 318. I had something significant the next morning, and even though there was some decent scarpace on the card, and the main event was a cool farewell to Dustin Poirier, but I feel like the fight was not pay-per-view, main event quality. The whole fight card did not have any real implications in any of the divisions. Dustin also looked pretty washed in his final fight against Max, and I think Dustin mentally gave up later in the fight when he was covering up instead of firing back. You can tell that he wanted to stay conscious and not end up on a highlight reel like Justin did. I kind of had flashbacks to all of Dustin's career moments when he jumped the ghillie in the second round, but it was too good to be true. This fight was sold well as Dusit's retirement as well as a close to a trilogy. The only thing I was really excited about for this fight was if Max was going to look as good as he did against Gaethje, because he was so fast in that fight, and then he carried that speed against Dustin as well. Another thing that did not make sense for these two main events is that both dudes fighting for the BMF belt were coming off of losses where they lost by finish, which is why the BMF is nothing but a promotional belt. So they can say that the pay-per-view has a title fight on it. The hype for this fight was very meh, but the performance from Max and the overall excitement from the fight were pretty good. So overall, I think this main event was C tier. The co-main event for UFC 312 was Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez, and I can't believe that Weili was an underdog for that fight. The odds makers were completely high when making the odds for that fight and underestimated the grappling skills of Weili and just how bad a striker Tatiana is. I have to say that maybe it runs in the relationship with both Tatiana Suarez and Patchy Mix being straight ass. There was some decent hype behind Tatiana Suarez coming into this fight because she was undefeated, and on top of that, she was due for a title shot for years now. But constant injuries and sickness delayed that. The first round was where I was scared for Weili because she got controlled, but as soon as the second round started, she made the adjustments and even got top position multiple times, and Suarez turned into a panic-shooting wrestler that couldn't secure takedowns. I mean, Tatiana's knees were literally red after shooting so many takedowns and them all getting stuffed. The crowd was absolutely electric as we watched the crotch sniffer in Tatiana Suarez continue to get denied and reversed time and time again, so that the more exciting fighter picked her apart and beat her face up. Not much more I could say for this fight, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Let's quickly pivot over to the most popular fighter in the UFC right now, Ilia Topuria, and discuss his main event fight against Charles Oliveira for the vacant title at UFC 317. This fight was booked a little bit on short notice. I believe it was about 6 weeks out from the event, and it was for the title vacated by the pound-for-pound king at the time, Islam Makhachev. The hype was real because Ilia Topuria was really following in the steps of Conor by winning the 145-pound belt and then moving up to win the 155 belt. The hype was real behind Topuria because he had just knocked out 2 of the greatest featherweights back-to-back, and now he had a chance to do the same against a lightweight legend. The only thing that really hindered this fight is that the rightful contender, Arman Tsarukyan, was not given a shot over Charles, who lost to Arman a year prior. Topuria gained an astronomical amount of followers because he beat Oliveira the same way, and it became the greatest 3-fight win streak in UFC history. On top of that, he has all the aura because he is undefeated and now holds titles in 2 separate weight categories, and he did it in dominant fashion. His performance also gave him the title of pound-for-pound #1, dethroning Islam for the title. People are hyped because with Ilia winning the title, we could see a potential super fight with him and Islam too, which is the biggest fight since McGregor and Khabib. The narrative that this fight saved International Fight Week is enough for me to know that the hype was real, the performance was there, and everybody was waiting for the finish to happen, so I'll put this fight in the A tier. Now we are going to cover the short-notice main event of UFC 311, which was when Islam faced Renato Moicano. This was maybe the shortest notice main event replacement in UFC history for a pay-per-view, but Islam is no stranger to these short-notice fights. Everyone was excited for the rematch between Arman and Islam because they had history, and Arman was one of the hardest fights for Islam with a short-notice debut. When we got news that Moicano was to step in, it ruined my day because I knew there was no chance for Moicano to win the fight, even by fluke. I had already made my prediction for Moicano versus Dariush, and I picked Dariush at the time. So seeing someone I picked to lose against Benil Dariush somehow get a win against Islam would be a miracle. It sucks for Islam because he was building his resume up with all the best contenders available, but he was a victim of things out of his control because the previous Charles fight also fell out. It would have been the cherry on top for Islam to beat Arman and break the lightweight defense record with a banger rather than an anticlimactic first-round submission with someone who posed no threat. The main event was nothing special, and people gasped at the act of a slip from Islam, and they hyped that Moicano could actually get a knockdown when in reality it was nothing close. The second we saw Moicano give up his neck, Islam secured the Darche and called it a night, and sadly that may have been the last time we will ever see him at welterweight. Unfortunately, the hype wasn't there, but it was a big-name fighter with a big performance, so I think I'll put this fight in C tier due to Moicano being mid. I'm going to pivot straight to the co-main of UFC 311, and the highlight of the event and my personal favorite fight of the year, Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov. This fight was very highly anticipated because there were some moments in the build-up where Merab got his feelings hurt and looked like he was going to duck him or be scared. Merab got angry multiple times before the fight and threw a sissy fit for no reason and acted like Umar said stuff to him when in reality it was all for motivation. And Umar said nothing to him. Merab did his weird shtick at the press conference, where he would blurt out random nonsense into the mic and constantly attack Umar verbally. But the real highlight of this fight is when we actually got to watch it. The crowd was absolutely crazy and loud because the new stadium in LA was really nice, and the second best since the Sphere. The fight started really fast too, with Umar using his fast and quick twitch ability to just beat Merab to the punch and easily win the first round by stinging Merab at the end of the round and then just winning the second round by being quicker once again. They both threw out a bunch of nonsense which looked like it was amateurs, but that's what you get with two grapplers striking with big things on the line. The third round was the turning point where Merab started to turn it on a little more, and it was much more back and forth, with Merab even starting to showboat a bunch during the third, but it arguably cost him the round because he got taken down and also did a fence grab to stay up. He then rallied back in the championship round and made it look like a dominant victory, even if it wasn't. In the end, they gave the decision to Merab in a close 48-47 decision, but it was the greatest bantamweight title fight and one of the greatest title fights of all time too. This is obviously in the S tier. Staying on the Merab topic, we are going into his main event at UFC 316 against O'Malley in the rematch. This fight made no sense because O'Malley sat on the couch for the year and then somehow got granted a rematch after getting dominated badly and doing nothing in between, while Merab improved a lot by fighting Umar and getting battle-tested in a 5-round war. The big talking point for this fight was that O'Malley stopped jerking off, which was a notable change. That will make all the difference against someone who trains so hard every day. That narrative quickly came to an end when we saw the first round because Sean O'Malley at least had the striking advantage in the first fight, but Merab put his foot on the gas in the second fight and even found his own clean shots in the striking this time and limited the output O'Malley could put out. The difference in grappling was very evident in this fight compared to the Umar fight because O'Malley really didn't have a way to get to his feet, and when he gave up his neck to try to get up, he got submitted right away. The submission showed a side of Merab's game we haven't seen to that point in his submission game, and now poses a threat to all future opponents. Overall, this fight was not good, but it was a little chaotic for the 2.5 rounds it lasted, so it's going in C tier. The worst title fight of the year took place at UFC 315 between Valentina Shevchenko and Manon Fiorot. Manon Fiorot had the most disappointing strategy of any title challenger ever, from someone who actually had the skills to win the title, because she found absolutely no success on the feet from someone who is known for their kickboxing. People don't talk about it enough, just how much clinching she tried to initiate, because every time she got close, she would go to clinch towards the fence and use her big size advantage against Valentina. The first round was the only exciting one, because Valentina cracked her with a bunch of right hooks as she came in. The following rounds were boring because they basically stood still waiting for each other to react, and Valentina had the game plan of staying on the outside and trying to keep the fight at kicking range so she would always be bouncing in her Muay Thai stance. The fight was close on the scorecards because there really wasn't much to score, but this ended up being another fight that brings Valentina closer to the greatest female fighter of all time and continues to build up her legendary legacy. Overall, this fight is a D-tier level. The co-main event at UFC 317 is barely even remembered, and that is because it was a flyweight title fight, and people have basically never remembered except for the Figgy Moreno fights and the Mighty Mouse Triple C fights. The fight was very one-sided, with Pantoja controlling the fight in both the striking and the grappling. I think Joe Rogan was on weed during this fight because he was saying Pantoja was tired, and then Pantoja got a takedown, took the back, and locked in the choke to win the fight. Pantoja became only the second fighter ever to win a championship belt in the lower weight classes. And we will talk about the other guy next, but it is even more impressive because Pantoja is in the lightest men's weight class, where speed and reflexes are even more prioritized compared to the 155 or 145 weight classes. Kai Kara France really only ever had a puncher's chance, which is why most people were picking Pantoja because he was someone with a granite chin, and he was better basically everywhere, so most people didn't really care about the fight since Topuria was the main event for the fight card anyway. Overall, it was a flyweight title fight, so there is not much to really put out for it. For that reason, it's going in the C tier. I saved one of the better ones for last, and yes, I'm talking about Volk versus Lopes. This fight had a big narrative of Volk returning after more than a year out and seeing how his chin would look after previously being knocked out twice in quick succession. Lopes was a rightful contender because he climbed the ladder at 145 pounds in a very tight time window, which ended up granting him the title shot. This fight was also for a vacant title because Ilya vacated it to move to 155, so Volk had a chance to be the first ever fighter aged 35 or older to win a title in lighter weight classes. Volk looked really clean and really fast in this fight, and I was super surprised by how much he was willing to engage in the pocket with Lopes, knowing that's where his strengths are. We all got a scare in the second round when Volk got knocked down at the end of the round, but he survived it. He absolutely mogged Lopes in the striking, but Lopes also caught him once in the fourth round and hurt him. But Volk clearly was the more effective striker. He just had less sting on his punches. I gotta respect Lopes too because he always walks forward no matter what, whether he is winning or losing. Overall, this fight was a tough one to call pre-fight, and I was worried for Volk, but he pulled through and put together a really exciting performance. Just for that, I'll put it in the A tier.